Selling out is one of those accusations that feels instantly understandable and strangely empty at the same time.
Are you selling out?
Sell out.
Who's the sellout?
Selling out shows, selling records.
I don't want to hang out with a bunch of wannabe corporate sellouts.
Aren't you selling out?
We use it casually, throw it around online, joke about it, and yet it still carries the ghost of a moral charge. To sell out is supposed to mean that something real was exchanged for something cheaper. Truth for money, integrity for comfort, conviction for reach. But if everyone is compromised, if every platform is monetized, and every voice is incentivized, what exactly is being sold? And who is still clean enough to judge? Let's go step by step across history, not to mourn a lost purity, but to understand how selling out went from a serious ethical failure to a background assumption of modern life. To do that, we have to start before capitalism, before artists, before brands. We have to start with a man who owned nothing, charged nothing, and still terrified the powerful enough to be killed for it. It's ancient Greece, and public moral provocateur Socrates is going around causing trouble. Socrates was constantly asking questions of the society around him. He was heavily focused on ethics, virtue, justice, and how one should live. He never wrote anything down, and simply went around having public discussions for no financial gain. He spent his life poor, and was eventually killed by Athens for corrupting the youth. We can think of Socrates as the prototype for our idea of an authentic figure, someone uncorrupted by greed, who died refusing to compromise on his principles.
There are some who will say, yes, Socrates, but can't you hold your tongue? Then you could go to a foreign city and no one would interfere with you. I'll have trouble making you understand my answer to this.
Socrates' student Plato took massive amounts of inspiration from his teacher and was deeply affected by his execution. One can imagine it is for this reason Plato despised sophists, a group of teachers at the time who went from city to city providing education at a cost, something his beloved teacher would never have dreamed of doing. Simply put, to Plato, if you're paid to persuade, you'll say whatever benefits the payer, not what's true. And his student, Aristotle, expanded on these ideas further in a way that can help us define at least what selling out meant back then. Aristotle distinguished between oikonomia and crematistics. Oikonomia is the management of resources to sustain life and community. It includes things like farming to feed your family, trading surplus goods for necessities, and using money as a means to meet real needs. Aristotle saw this as natural because humans must meet their needs and communities need coordination. And so, this is moral, sensible, and necessary. Crematistics, on the other hand, is the pursuit of wealth for its own sake, hoarding money, speculating with it, taking interest, and treating money as something that should endlessly reproduce itself, were all things which Aristotle hated. He hated them because there is no natural stopping point. Money becomes the goal, and human needs are subordinated to profit. He found this profoundly unnatural because money has no intrinsic use. Its accumulation has no internal limit, and scariest of all, desire becomes infinite. Now, selling out back then wasn't really a betrayal of self-expression yet. That comes much later. More so, it's based on a betrayal of truth and civic responsibility. This period establishes the idea that being paid can distort sincerity. It is a suspicion that never fully disappears and remains a foundation of good journalism today. It's sometime around the 16 to 1800s. Capitalism is now a thing, and Enlightenment thinkers are doing a lot of thinking. With the birth of capitalism, people had to start getting used to selling their labor because it was necessary to survive. However, this also included artists, writers, and thinkers. John Locke sits at a crucial turning point in the history of selling out because he accepts the rise of markets and wage labor while quietly exposing the moral danger they introduce: dependence. Writing in the late 17th century, Locke lived through the collapse of feudal loyalty and the expansion of commercial society. Unlike Plato or Aristotle, he did not imagine a world where people could remain economically insulated from money or power. Instead, he assumed that individuals would sell their labor, accumulate property, and participate in markets. The ethical question for Locke was therefore not whether commerce was corrupting in itself, but whether economic arrangements preserved or undermined a person's independence of judgment. For Locke, freedom meant more than the absence of force. It meant the ability to consent genuinely and to think without coercion. When material survival depends on pleasing a patron, a church, a monarch, or later an employer, belief itself becomes fragile. You may speak voluntarily, but your opinions are shaped by what keeps you paid. This is where Locke quietly anticipates the modern idea of selling out. He worries less about greed than about the subtle bending of conscience under conditions of necessity. Property, in Locke's famous account, is justified because it arises from one's labor and preserves individual freedom. But that justification collapses if economic dependence destroys the very autonomy it was meant to protect. Selling out, in Lockean terms, is not taking money or engaging in commerce. It is structuring your life so that dissent becomes too costly. Let's skip to the 19th century, where modern selling out really takes shape. The Romantic Revolution is in the air, and people are finding their authentic selves. Romanticism was an artistic and intellectual movement that emphasized individualism and nature. It rejected industrialization and mass culture, redefining art as an expression of the inner self, no longer a craft, but a calling. At the same time in Paris, Bohemian culture was becoming more prominent. One's poverty was a badge of authenticity, and commercial success implied compromise. Here is where the idea of the starving artist was born. Poor, yes, but morally superior to their more popular and well-paid counterparts.
The only true currency in this bankrupt world is what you share with someone else when you're uncool.
Charles Baudelaire was a French poet, essayist, and critic, best known for Les Fleurs du Mal, The Flowers of Evil, a controversial series of poems published in 1857. Baudelaire despised what he saw as mass taste shaped by money and comfort. He felt art had begun to cater to bourgeois reassurance, something safe, respectable, and emotionally dull. But for him, true art had to confront our decay, our dark desires, and the ugliness of life. This is why Les Fleurs du Mal was scandalized. It refused moral improvement in favor of truthful expression. Oscar Wilde is a particularly interesting figure in the history of selling out, because he both rejected bourgeois commercial values and deliberately played with fame, money, and performance. He felt comfortable exposing the tension at the heart of modern artistic integrity, rather than resolving it. I always found this balance in Wilde fascinating. In his preface to The Picture of Dorian Gray, he writes, "All art is quite useless." Sure, this sounds flippant, but it's radical. For Wilde, art isn't made to please society, educate the masses, or sell well. And once it is made for those things, it ceases to be art. But here's the kicker. He also cultivated celebrity, used mass media, and performed his decadence publicly. But Wilde was never claiming some form of moral purity. He was exposing society's hypocrisy by exaggerating style and performance. This matters because it introduces a new idea that you don't resist selling out by avoiding visibility. You resist it by refusing to pretend popularity equals truth. This is quite punk rock of Oscar Wilde. Speaking of which, punk's relationship to selling out is unusually intense because the concept isn't peripheral to punk, it is foundational. Punk didn't just dislike commercialization, it defined itself in opposition to it.
Well, here's the deal, folks. You do a commercial, you're off the artistic roll call forever. End of story, okay? You're another corporate shill, you're another whore at the capitalist gangbang, and if you do a commercial, there's a price on your head, everything you say is suspect, and every word that comes out of your mouth is now like a turd falling into my drink.
And then punk had to survive in a world where survival almost always meant compromise. Punk took hold in the mid-1970s in London and New York, and you could say punks hated four things. Firstly, corporate rock. Think of all the reasons people hate Nickelback. That's basically what punk loathed about all rock on the radio.
Sax player named Albert Eiler. Okay, he made music because it was coming out of him. And then on the other hand, there's like a band who goes out, whips out the demographic and goes, okay, we're aiming for that.
Right.
Okay, now one thing is real and the other thing is business.
Second was virtuoso excess. People who overly focused on someone's technical ability with an instrument missed the point of playing music. Self-expression, not perfection. And if you're trying to express perfection, who the f*** are you? They also hated stadium tours and music being seen as a prestigious industry, similar to Baudelaire and Oscar Wilde. The point of punk was, anyone can play. Skill is secondary to sincerity. Expression beats polish. DIY over institutions. In the punk scene, selling out means you are collaborating with power, so signing with big labels or deliberately making a radio-friendly sound were big no-nos. You see, who is making the music is often important to its message. Early punk music was created by the working class who had been disenfranchised from the world around them. In a world where the only thing you have is your voice and credibility, commercial co-optation threatens the only power those communities possess. So, when punk became insanely popular, a crisis followed. If the system now wants you, why is that? Did you change? Or did the system absorb you? Punk was forced to face a brutal paradox. If your message spreads, it will be commodified. If it isn't commodified, not enough people will hear it to make a difference, or it may disappear. Punk hit a crossroad. There were those who doubled down on pure, unadulterated anti-capitalism, but most came to the realization that the genre's own popularity was now in direct conflict with its original message.
Well, no, but there was a disconnect, like originally being a band that, we were an anarcho-punk band, so singing about anarchism, and that's why you get called a sellout, because like being anti-capitalist and then making money off of your music conflict.
And that's when people began moving the goalposts on what selling out really was. Okay, you can sign to a major record label, so long as you pinky promise you're still making music you want to make.
You write a song, you know that thing when what you want to hear from a band that you're excited about is, we make music because we love the music that we make. If anybody else likes it, it's a bonus.
But that of course relies on your willingness to accept a once respected punk artist now just happens to be drawn to stadium music for artistic reasons.
It's strange. First I just wanted to make like a punk record that was more like, songs like Look Mono Brains, Coma City, Living in the 20s. Now I want to make something that sounds more stadium, something big.
Sometimes though, artists were genuinely put in a tough spot. They hadn't compromised their artistic integrity. They had simply become popular.
Normally what happens is, like with the success of Mother, people say, oh, you guys sold out. The song is 7 years old. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So all of a sudden they don't like you, and it happens with a lot of bands. It's not you've changed. It's that because now you're more popular, you're not their little personal band anymore.
Other times, you just felt like the artist was simply trying to convince you and themselves what they were doing was okay.
Of course the ad is trying to sell you something, and by using a band you like, attempting to gain your confidence by exploiting the band's integrity for a commercial end. So what? You're not a moron, are ya?
Metallica, Green Day, The Clash, Kiss, U2, Mumford & Sons, Imagine Dragons, Maroon 5, Coldplay, Chance the Rapper, McHammer, Vanilla Ice, and many more have been charged with selling out in some shape or form. However, these artists only suffered a reputational hit among a certain demographic of people who still believe in that sort of thing. In terms of commercial success, they were all rewarded handsomely. Some who hadn't sold out even came out and said they wished they had. Selling out would have been worth it because sticking to their punk's principles reaped them no reward.
To cut you a check, whether it's a record label or a sponsor or a movie or a video game, all these bands out there, all these young bands, if you get a shot, take it. Believe me, 20 years from now, like I look back at all the movie soundtracks and all the video games and all the stuff that we turned down because we thought it was cheesy in 2000, I would have took them all now.
Of course, a tiny minority of artists maintained their principles, but they paid the opposite price. Hardcore punk band Fugazi was one of the noble few. No major labels, no corporate sponsorships, no merch exploitation, no VIP tickets, no Ticketmaster, no dynamic pricing, no press photos, no interviews for hype. They priced tickets at the peak of their popularity for no more than $5 to $10, and for many years wouldn't even use streaming platforms.
I have a lot of contempt for the record industry, and I don't particularly want to be a part of it any more than I have to.
Avoid greed. Charge only $8 for CDs and $5 at the door. Book your own shows, and do not sell merchandise. That's right, no t-shirts. And do not make music videos.
You might have seen the famous clip of Nirvana reacting in shock that Madonna was selling tickets for $50 when they only charged $17.
Charge anywhere between $50 to $75 for tickets.
Who charges that much money? Who does that? How much do we charge a ticket, John?
What you might not have seen is that even they were put to shame when it was mentioned what Fugazi was charging.
We charge $17.
So what
Fugazi's playing tonight, they're charging $5.
So how does that make you feel?
Weak. Exploited.
Fugazi wasn't some unknown band, but in a capitalist world, they were too pure to scale. The media didn't know how to talk about them. They refused the mechanisms that turned bands into legacies, and they quietly stopped performing in 2003 without a farewell tour. They proved an artist can exist without selling out, yet also demonstrated that doing so often means you won't receive the same canonization or cultural permanence on the scale of your peers. For almost everyone else, selling out became not a single act, but a sliding scale of compromise. Slowly but surely, even the hardcore music no longer cared about whether or not any artist sold out or not.
Like, as long as he continues to make good music, music that I enjoy, music that I think is good, music that I think is artistically viable and good execution, good quality, creative, thoughtful, lyrical, I don't really care how much he sells out.
But regardless of how inevitable the compromise punk and all music would have to make, the genre lost something when money and success found the art.
Called out oppression and discrimination and rejected corporate capitalist culture, but that time is long gone. Today, punk rock has become a product to be sold no different than a Big Mac, a MacBook, or a Mac truck.
It wasn't even necessarily that the music had changed, but the microphone had been taken off the left-wing working class and given to capitalists.
And there used to be a way to stick it to the man. It was called rock and roll. But guess what? Oh no. The man ruined that too with a little thing called MTV!
And suddenly, listening to punk felt very different to what it used to.
This is what those kids think they're hearing on those headsets. And this is what they're really hearing.
Conform. Free will is overrated.
As we have seen in earlier periods, selling out implied self-deception or moral failure. Since the death of the original punk scene, the last organized community bonded on not selling out was gone. Now, most people already assume institutions are corrupt, platforms exploit users, and success requires compromise.
Let's just talk real quick about the term sellout. I mean, how big that term was thrown around in the 90s, and no one cares anymore. I've talked about it on the show.
This produces what philosopher Peter Sloterdijk called cynical reason. People know the system is compromised and participate anyway. Deep down, we all know we have sold out in some way. Let's face it, you probably sold out some of your morals to watch this video on whatever device you're on. Almost all of our phones, computers, and electric cars run on batteries made from cobalt, which is mined by child slaves in places like Congo. And when we turn on that phone, what do we see? Well, Bill Hicks and Fugazi would call them sellouts.
BetterHelp.
BetterHelp.
This episode of URL is brought to you by ZocDoc.
Today's video is brought to you by Genshin Impact.
So grab that on the City Company when you can. And the City Company is powered by Shopify.
My absolute favorite for anything financial. We genuinely use them for everything we do.
I'll be using the man's.
Well, if he does, Current would be the perfect place to deposit all that money.
So accusations of selling out don't reveal anything new. They feel redundant. We say, yes, of course it's compromised. That's the deal. Moral shock only works when it exposes a hidden contradiction. Today, the contradiction is explicit. Historically, selling out implied you had something autonomous, and you gave it up in exchange for money, safety, or reach, and the shame came from an idea of betrayal. But today, who exactly are you betraying? Everyone else is a sellout too. This has flipped our idea of authenticity on its head. For many online audiences, especially on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, being sponsored or monetized is the baseline marker that you are worth listening to. So instead of, they sold out, therefore they are corrupted, we get, they have sponsors, therefore they are successful. This flips the moral logic entirely. Monetization now precedes legitimacy, rather than threatening it. And this causes a truly Kafkaesque phenomena where people will pretend to sell out, to give them credibility. This is the world of fake brand deals and sponsorships. People today will now pretend to sell out. A great example of this is on Instagram. Wannabe influencers will say they have a brand deal or a sponsorship because it implies they are popular or knowledgeable enough to get one. Traditionally, you would build an audience, which leads to recognition, which leads to monetization. In today's social media landscape, monetization is treated as evidence of recognition, and that is what builds an audience. This means there are now companies taking advantage of this rampant thirst for a brand affiliation. Some companies provide no other service than to make influencers look like they have a corporation backing them, shortcutting their path to real celebrity status. MLMs and pyramid schemes thrive in this environment. They offer the aesthetic of sponsorship, the language of entrepreneurship, and the performance of success. They allow people to say, "I'm partnering with a brand," "I'm an ambassador," or "I'm building something." They sell the appearance of having sold out, which would be perverse just 30 years ago. In the 1960s and 80s, being unmonetized signaled resistance. Corporate interest meant co-optation, and selling out meant losing credibility. Now, being unmonetized signals failure. Corporate association means you made it. Not selling out suggests no one wants you. This is not just cultural drift. It's a total reversal of the meaning of legitimacy. This is why people will accept obvious scam sponsorships and promote predatory products. Today, the appearance of monetization matters more than the ethics of the product. When people say shame doesn't exist today, they are mistaken. What has changed is what people feel shameful about. Why isn't selling out embarrassing or scandalous anymore? Because it requires a shared moral code, a belief in an alternative, and a sense that something sacred might be lost. None of these are stable in today's world. The dominant judgment today isn't moral betrayal. It's aesthetic and social failure. We don't care if you sell out. Just don't be cringe about it. Promote your MLMs, but don't make it too obvious. You can scam me. Just don't use language that makes me feel dumb. The charge isn't, "You betrayed your values." It's, "This is an embarrassing way of going about betraying your values." People are judged for showing desperation for validation. You're allowed to play the game. Just don't let us see how badly you want it. That's a shift from ethical condemnation to status humiliation. And doesn't it feel so much weaker? This new shame is enforced by ridicule, not principle and lives in comments and memes, but of course disappears the moment you do gain a following. It doesn't stop the behavior. It just filters out the unsuccessful. When selling out lost its moral clarity, civic oversight weakened. In earlier eras, selling out implied a moral betrayal of values, principles, or community. That made accusations serious because they pointed to genuine ethical failure. Today, as selling out became widespread and normalized, the very language of moral failure lost weight. Everyone does it, and "it's just the way the system works" became default assumptions. That has a political corollary. When leaders and institutions are seen as inevitably compromised, mass public outrage becomes muted or resigned.
The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls.
UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has accepted and been scrutinized for large numbers of gifts and hospitality, including tickets to events, clothing, and gifts from donors and foreign visitors, which he has declared in official registers.
This is who has given the most gifts and hospitality to Keir Starmer. Wealthy donors, sports firms, music companies, media giants.
Some items were repaid amid criticism, but much of the scrutiny focused on procedural adherence rather than any wrongdoing.
Because they have to be public about it.
So he's declared them all?
He's declared it all. I understand that.
So we got there in the end.
Sorry, yeah.
So the thing that is wrong and sleazy and immoral is the thing that he told us about.
This sparked debate about whether politicians benefit from perks beyond appropriate limits. Yet most commentary remained in the realm of political point scoring. Even when critics highlighted cronyism and cash for access, the dominant tone was one of routine politics, not a sense of betrayal of democratic values. I chose this example because while it's not a big deal by today's standards, what do we think Plato would have made of that? Would Aristotle considered Keir's gifted football boxes, designer clothes, and Taylor Swift tickets as practicing oikonomia for the people? Or crematistics for himself? And is this the type of a man who should be guiding an entire country through a time of immense division and economic struggle? In a more obvious example of shameless corruption, President Donald Trump's reported plan to accept a foreign-provided luxury Boeing 747 as a gift from Qatar.
I think it's a great gesture from Qatar.
Yet public discourse tended to treat this as yet another political spat, rather than an existential crisis of governance. Many media outlets reported it with analysis and partisan framing, but far fewer commentators invoked systemic corruption in a way that demanded any kind of action from other members of government. When political leaders routinely accept gifts, perks, and donor hospitality, it becomes normal political behavior rather than scandal. Instead of outrage, we get resigned commentary. Well, politicians always do this, or ironic jokes. This reflects a broader cultural numbness to selling out. Compromise or self-enrichment isn't shocking, it's expected.
Which there already is. Yeah. Because people are frustrated not having their voice of reason confirmed. And everyone has that voice of reason that goes, this is bull, man, what I'm watching is bull. And yet, the media does not confirm it. So after a while, people begin to think they're insane. And that's the bummer about it. But that's why I love non-mainstream stuff, because you actually hear honest emotions. And that's what you won't hear on mainstream TV ever, is honest emotions.
Because scandals recur constantly, from donors to ministers, lobbyists, foreign gifts, and regulation loopholes. Each new instance feels smaller in comparison to the sheer volume. Public attention moves on quickly, creating an effect similar to desensitization. In earlier cultural contexts, selling out was tied to an ethical rupture, a clear abandonment of previously held values and principles. Artists, rebels, and thinkers were expected to resist co-optation and retain integrity. Now, political actors routinely navigate markets, donations, hospitality, influence, and power. We allow moral compromises, deal-making, and self-interest to run rampant in politics. Instead of asking, is this corruption a betrayal of the public trust? We often hear, is this legally permissible? Did the rules require transparency? Will this damage them politically? When selling out lost its ability to shame individuals in commercial and cultural spheres, the concept also lost power in political life. Governments and leaders can operate in gray areas with minimal collective shock because we assume the selling out as being inevitable. This does not mean people don't care about corruption. Rather, the default public response has shifted toward apathy or resigned commentary. There is little moral indignation demanding structural change. Across all the periods of time we have covered today, the core fear stays the same. When money or power enters the picture, something essential may be lost. The question is there anything left to lose? Or did we sell it all?